Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage. Today we're going to do a little update on the 34.5 window, the little old lady car that we rescued from that giant Michigan stash that we did a video on earlier this summer. So the whole idea for this car, to kind of reiterate before we get going, is we're trying to do small modifications to this car, like if grandma would have given the car to her grandson or something like that, or a hand-me-down, what they would have done with basically no money and parts they could have essentially found in the junkyard, or modifications they could have done on a very small budget. So we've already done the headlights, we did change the wheels and tires and some of that stuff. We got it sitting a little bit better and looking a lot better. But I want to work on the suspension just a little bit. We threw it on the lift here just to fix some leaks in the oil pan. I thought it would be a really great time to work on doing the suspension. So I'm going to grab the camera, show you guys where we're at, and then we'll talk about what we're going to be doing. Alright, so first things first, let's take a look at where we're at. We'll drop some photos in of how the car was sitting in when we did the tires in the video, but you could see that basically we have, I could fit pretty much, almost fit my hand, or pretty much can, between the wheel and the tire and the bottom of the fender there in the center in the front. So really all I want to do is just get this fender down to where it's visually sitting right about here. So we really only need to go down probably about an inch maybe to get that front down a little bit, and that should be sitting pretty sweet. Now in the rear it is sitting quite a bit higher here. So the rear we have a fair amount of wheel gap. So what I'd like to do is get it, basically I'd like it to sit kind of where the front is. So maybe just about, you could fit your hand in between the rear tire and the fender, and the front will be down to where it's, this lip is basically like even there, and it'll give it a nice rake. We already have a nice rubber rake going on, so by adding a little bit of suspension rake, I think it'll be sitting really sweet, and everything should still function how it did before. So I just want to show you guys that before. So I'm going to lift it up. We're going to work on the front first because that's the easiest, and then we'll work on the back. Alright, so this is where the simplicity on these cars is really nice. So the front suspension on these, we have basically this whole leaf pack here. The nice thing is the majority of the leaves are held together with this clamp here, as well as there is a center bolt that holds everything together. But since we're just removing probably the top, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 leaves max, we don't even need to touch these clamps, so it's not as big of a deal to take the spring pack apart, and we can basically just take the center bolt out, leave the tension on these, and we can take our leaves off and put it back together. So we just need to take these 4 bolts out of the spring clamp here that clamps around the cross member. We need to take the shock dog bones off there, and then basically we can let everything kind of just like droop down, and it shouldn't be a problem. Oh, by the way, totally old school. White wall on the inside because we didn't have a tire that matched here. I'm sure somebody's going to mention it. But yeah, we did that. So we can just drop the whole thing down. The brake, since it's mechanical brakes, it just has these brake rods here, and they are on a pivot as well. Way in the back, there's like a master pivot bias bar setup that's right here, so they can pivot down, and we have the ball and socket here at the back of the wishbone where it can pivot as well. So we should be able to, at the most, maybe just loosen that bolt at the pivot back there, but we can pretty much drop the whole suspension down and just put like jack stands under it, and then just enough to get our hands in there to take the suspension, the springs apart, and then we can just slip everything back together. Now I've already sort of degreased all this, so to speak. It had like inches of grime on it, so that you can at least see the bolts now, but we're still going to get greasy doing this. So I'm going to throw some gloves on, work on getting these bolts all loose and everything pretty much ready to droop down. Then I'll let the lift down and we can put some jack stands under it and lift the car up a little bit. All right, so I got the spring pack all apart, and this bolt, you may have heard us in the background talking. When I took this bottom plate off, the spring just separated, and then the square nut just like fell off. And like, okay, that's not good. And then when we lifted everything up, luckily I was using the lift, so I was able to just slowly lift it up. The top of the spring pack decompressed. Like I mentioned, there's those factory clamps that are on the outside to keep like I guess the sleeves with the most tension on them, to be honest, is kind of on the end there, and keeps those tight, which was good. And when I took it apart, this is kind of like the top, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that came off, and that's that bolt. So the bolt is like all worn out. So this is most definitely the original bolt. It probably just rotted away and broke and came apart over the years. But I took the tape measure here just to measure these springs. So these are just sitting right on top. They're not really, they have a little bit of tension, but not a ton. Not like the bottom leaves that are like really compressed. So measuring these leaves ends up being right at about 1 inch for taking this little grip of leaves out. So I'm gonna start with these and set it back down, see how it looks. And then before we put everything back together, put the center bolt in, because the center bolt is kind of a pain in the ass to get back in. Not kind of, it is. And so I'm going to set it down, make sure we like the height in the front, because we can just use the lift to let it up and down. Once we like that, then we'll let it up, put a bolt back in. We'll put some spacers down underneath so that the bolt and everything clamps correctly again, and we should be good to go in the front. Oh man, I nested right in. Here we go. Oh shoot, that is... I think that's like a ticket right there, at least from that side. Maybe I should let that lift down more. It looks better on the other side. There's like wheel gap on that side. Maybe the car might be sitting crooked because the suspension didn't. I don't know why the other side looks so much better.
Yeah, the other side is tucked up in the fender.
It must just be sitting crooked forever. Maybe the leaf is sitting. There is no shocks on, so I don't know if that's causing a problem. How's that now? It's still sitting crooked. It looks like the whole car's sitting crooked.
Yeah, it's still where it was, 28 and a half.
Yeah, you look at the whole car, it's sitting.
Is it? Okay.
Like that. So I don't know if something's not nested in. Well, I don't have the clamp on, and you can change that lower clamp, how you tighten those 4 bolts down actually centers, because the suspension, since it's buggy suspension, teeters on that top front spring. So if you tighten the bolts evenly, it will pull everything tight. So it's just naturally leaning to that side probably. Yeah. So I might need to just put the plate on and run the bolts up and see if it'll...
Yeah, see if it'll straighten itself.
Well, that's a problem with these cars all the time. After you build them, they sit a little crooked, and then you gotta like tighten those bolts up to favor one side or whatever to get to get them to even out. And then after you drive them, you usually have to adjust again. So
yeah, you can definitely see the car's leaning pretty hard to the right now, though.
Yeah, I agree.
Looks pretty much dead level to me.
Okay, so that helped now.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's the ticket, just barely covering the tread.
Yep.
Oh, that's it. I love it. That's funny. I was like, what's wrong here?
Right.
Oh no, it's shock. Yeah, it's like just barely tucking the tread.
Yep.
So I want to get the rear so it's like just above the tread, like, like this.
Right, yeah, get the visible rake.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, where the front was sitting standard is how I'd like the rear to be. It was like you could just barely get your hand or fingers between it.
Yeah.
between the tire and the fender, but that looks bitchin'. Yeah, that looks good. It's funny that just taking those few springs out.
Yep,
leaves out.
oh, yeah. Yeah, that is.
That's perfect. Let's see what the... Plenty of travel.
Yep, there you go.
So it's not like it's, and nothing's smacking or banging or...
Yep,
That's good.
that looks freaking sharp.
All right, so just had to do a bunch of work to get this thing not only sitting down and everything bolted together, but to get it to function. So much like the Schroll coupe, once I dropped everything down and we connected the front shocks were just about out of travel because we lowered it about an inch. That took away like an inch of shock travel, and it was like bottoming out the shocks, and I wanted to shorten those links much like we did before, which I got the idea from the Dorian Roadster, which was built, we think, back in the late 40s, early 50s. That car was built, so it is definitely a period kind of modification. So now with all that done, it's sitting down really sweet in the front. We have travel of the suspension, the shocks. It's kind of crazy how much you wouldn't think those lever shocks do that much, but with the shocks off, I could really bounce the car like crazy. As soon as we put those shocks on, it really stiffened things up, made it a lot better. And even though we have probably a little less travel than we would have had before hitting the bump stop, it's still plenty of travel. It's probably got like three inches or more of travel before it hits the bump stop, which these cars don't have a ton of travel as it is. So now I got the front down. I'm going to try and get the rear down about the same, about an inch. That'll give us about maybe an inch or a little less of wheel gap in the back, and I think it'll be sitting really, really sweet. So we're going to put this back up on the lift, kind of the same process, but without, you know, some of the steering stuff we have to worry about and check. We can just drop it down, take a couple weaves out or whatever, put it back in, and try and get the rear to sit just as good as the front does. So I'm going to throw this back up on the lift. About all I trust on this thing. Get the rest laying underneath. That would make it easier to take apart. The lift. Okay. Come on. Thank you. I'm more worried for you. I don't want you getting hurt. All right, now we're loose. So when I lift this lift up, it'll let off these top leaves. And then I can sneak the ones I want out and put it back together. Yeah, go ahead up. I had put the 2x4 too far back and it caught it. I didn't notice it the whole time. Just stupid mistake. Not the end of the world. I can bend it back when I have it back in here. All right, so we're clear. I just gotta go. I think we gotta go up a little more. A little more. Okay. Yeah, that's real good. So top pack.
Throw all those in the trash.
1, 2, 3, 4. All right, go ahead. Go ahead. Curve spring, you gotta. Go ahead. Yep. Got caught it. So just get back just a little bit, so just in case the jack stands or something. To catch it. Okay, you can go down. Oh, there it went.
You know what it might have been? It might have needed the wheels to move a little
Yeah.
bit to pivot.
Yeah. Might have been too much.
We're off.
That's exactly how I wanted it. With the, that's how the front was. You could stick your hand between the tire. I just went an inch straight down.
Yeah. That is like, can't see the top of the tread.
Yeah, and this is the front all the way down. All right, so we got the car sitting down, and it's sitting pretty sweet. We took the same number of leaves out of the rear, and if you come over here, you can look and see the wheel gap is like really good. I mean, it's basically got no wheel gap here, so it's almost tucking the tread, if not over the top of the tread. So this looks really bitchin', but I think for the style that we're doing with the car, it's a little bit too much. And Mike also brought up like it's got an empty tank of gas, and it may settle in a little bit. So I think we actually want to go back up a couple of leaves. So we took 5 out to match what we took out in the front, but I think we're gonna actually I might put like 3 back in or 2 back in and play with that. The nice thing is we have all the spring bolts and everything are all loose, so we can kind of play with it without too much hassle. So we can just throw 2 in, see if we like that. If not, we can lift it back up, put 1 more in, and see where it sits. So I think we're gonna try, I'm gonna start with 2, see how that sits, and then we'll go from there. But it's close, it's really close, but I think we just want the back end just up just a little bit.
Clear?
Yep. Keep going. Just a hair more. Okay. Where are those leaves at?
2?
Yeah.
The 2 bigger ones?
Yeah, the 2 larger ones. There's a curve right there. See, these have quite a bit of spring to them. These
Yeah.
2 here, so they're actually going to add some stiffness back into the suspension too, which will be nice. That's where they want to live. Just follow the grease mark.
I was gonna say there's probably a...
There's like a nest of grease. Let's see this go in. All right. Go down a little more. Okay. I think it'll just nest in. Let me get my ass out of there. And I'll watch it from afar. All right, go ahead. Yeah, it's seating in. Keep going. Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
They're off in the rear.
That is like... 2 is the ticket, I think.
was picky. I don't know, but then again, it's not tucking much in the rear, in the front. See, I think if you go much more, you're gonna be back to where it almost, even though it does have a rake, it's gonna look like it's got a backwards rake just because of the tire gap situation. So I'm wondering if that might be the ticket. It's hard to say with it sitting inside.
Yeah, I know, it's
It wouldn't be hard to drive it out right now. It won't hurt anything to just start it up and pull it outside and let it, even just driving it that little bit might settle it. Stupid as it is, I'm almost tempted to say one leaf. I don't know. No, I think you're right. Because if you take one leaf out, then it gets down a little bit in the rear, then it's going to suddenly almost look like it's got reverse rake, even though it doesn't. It'll have that.
it has just the right.
Yeah, and I think it will settle in a little bit once you.
Well, the good news is we didn't change, like put a new spring in, so it shouldn't settle
Yeah,
a
that's true.
ton. It might
Yeah.
settle a little.
That's why.
Doubt there's no grease between all the.
That's why I'm almost tempted to say I would go down a leaf, but it's crazy how much difference 2 leaves made. It was like tuck and tire almost.
Yeah.
Might be. Just has to pull the bolt. What a pain in the butt. Come on. Oh, that felt like something. Let's try that. Felt like it clipped, it kind of like popped in. Alright, so we just need to get the impact and turn the air on, and then we're ready to
was actually better than I expected.
Alright, so we pulled the car out on flat ground just so we could get a look at it. I ended up kind of going with the setup that we had where we put 2 springs back in. So it really only took, I think, 3 springs out, 3 leaves out in the rear. And it looks really good. It's up just a little bit in the rear, but we have no fuel. And I think it's going to settle in just a little bit after you're in it and driving it and bouncing around and all that stuff. So really happy with how it looks. We got to hook up the rear shocks. One of the rear shocks I think was bad and they had the arm disconnected, but I'm going to do that kind of off camera, just little stuff that we have to do that doesn't really need to be in the video. But I'm really happy how it looks. Gives the car a nice little, like just a little bit better of a stance, but it's not anything real crazy where it looks like it's like a rat rod that's slammed on the ground and dragging around. It just looks like a cool early hot rod, which is what we're going for. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of the new stance of the car. We're really psyched on it and we're getting really close. We got to do an exhaust, a little bit of wiring, and this thing has pretty much got the done stamp on it to just cruise it around and enjoy it a little bit this fall and into the winter. Thanks guys, catch you later.